Hey, what's going on, everyone? Jared Sandler here with you, getting ready for episode 42 of the Just a Sec conversation with the great Julia Morales. Sideline reporter, dugout reporter, however you want to characterize it, for the Houston Astros. She does stuff with the Rockets, big in the Houston athletic community, in the charitable community, someone who's got a really, really interesting story. And I know you're probably thinking, Jared, the Astros, you can't stand the Astros. Nothing's changed there, but we all love Emily Jones, right? Well, Julia Morales is the Emily Jones of the Astros, and how can you not love Emily? You can't not love Emily, and same applies to Julia. She's great, and really enjoyed my conversation with her about her experiences, not only professionally, but growing up in Texas, going to UT, being a part of the University of Texas athletic department when they won the Rose Bowl. Julia was a member of the cheer team, and you know what's really interesting as well, prior to that, growing up in a family with a father who ran for a political office. We talk about all of that and more coming up. Would really appreciate if you would consider subscribing, liking, commenting, sharing the link. The more eyes and ears on this, the better. Plus, don't be afraid to browse around the channel, not just these interviews, although you can catch all 42, but other interviews outside of the Just a Sec conversation, covering some of the big stories in the sports world, commentary, and more. So would appreciate if you would take a dive into the channel if you've got the time. But alas, it's time for episode 42 of the Just a Sec conversation with the great Julia Morales. All right, Julia, the first question I like to ask people, what do you recall or what stands out about your childhood, whether it's interests, influences, hobbies, whatever? When I ask you that very open-ended and kind of generic question, what are the things that stand out to you?
Oh, my goodness. Okay. Let's see. When I think about my childhood, I grew up in a tiny town close to Dallas, actually, southeast of Dallas. It's called Crandall. And I think of just like kind of being an open air kid where I grew up outside. I played all sports, just very free. What a fun childhood I had out in the country where there just wasn't a lot of rules, and we lived on a lot of land, and you were able to kind of do everything at a small school. So yeah, I mean, that was really my interest and hobbies, was just being outside, playing with my little brother, and then sports. Both my parents played sports in college, actually. My dad ran track, and then my mom played basketball. She actually walked on at SMU, so she's got a shot. And so we had no choice but to be competitive growing up. I mean, even they would turn our birthday parties into some serious, like, Olympic type, like games, and we'd have water balloon fights and like some kind of races that my dad would make up. I mean, it started at a very young age. So that's just what my family did growing up. But there's a big part of my childhood I can't go without talking about, and it's my dad ran for U.S. Senate in the state of Texas when I was 10 years old. That really kind of changed my entire life. It changed all of our lives in the way that we viewed the world, in the way that we acted at home, and just I learned so much about the world. I learned so much about me. And, of course, it was what drove me to be a television reporter, which I am still doing today. So I'd be crazy not to say that wasn't a huge part of my childhood, even though it wasn't me running for U.S. Senate. Dad definitely made a huge impression on me in my life.
Okay, so I want to get to that in a second, but what were the sports that you enjoyed most when you were growing up, either playing or watching or whatever?
So playing, it was basketball. That was my favorite. And I started when I was really young. My mom was actually my little dribblers coach there, and she was kind of intense looking back on it. But I loved that sport. And that was, my dad put a basketball goal in the backyard and put just enough concrete out there. I mean, I can still sit here and probably make 9 out of 10 free throws because of the, just the amount of shots I took growing up, and just the time that I spent out there. So that was my first love. When it comes to watching sports, growing up in a small town, it was Friday Night Lights. So we loved everything about football and high school football and being. It was just the biggest thing ever. And then, the Dallas Cowboys were winning when I was young and up and coming as a sports fan, and starting to realize, who big players were, big names were. And so we were in front of the TV. So I was a Troy Aikman fan. I was Emmitt Smith fan, Michael Arian fan. I'm still a fan of those guys. I don't talk about it too much in Houston, but those were my first, those were my first favorite athletes. And when it comes to baseball, my love that I have now for baseball comes later in life. But we loved the Rangers too, and we would love going to the ballpark. And Pudge Rodriguez wore number 7, which ended up being the reason why I wore number 7. That was my favorite number when I got into high school, and I played volleyball, basketball, ran track because my dad made me run track, and so I was a hurdler, and I was a cheerleader as well. I mean, I did everything. That was the cool thing about going to a small school, but I literally did everything that I possibly could athletically, and when it came to competitive sports, and we loved it all. My brother did everything too. So, yeah, basketball was first love. Football, it's still just, it's my roots, it's my heart and soul. But now I've got this whole new world of baseball that I've just absolutely fallen in love with.
All right, so you mentioned your dad in running for U.S. Senate in the mid-'90s, and that was while you were growing up. What was that experience like for you, on the positive, maybe, the negative, because obviously I know politics can be tough sometimes. So what do you recall about that experience?
Yeah, so you're right about bringing up the negative, because I hate politics to this day because of it, just because my experience was different. And I know that almost sounds, it just doesn't sound like an intellectual approach to take on something that's so important in our world. But when you're that age and things are really traumatizing for a 10-year-old, and my brother was 8, 9 at the time. There was the fun part of it. There was my dad that all of a sudden, he had this dream. He was a school teacher there at Mesquite Poteet, and decided, like, I'm sick of some things. I'm going to see if I can make a change. And if I can't be in office, I'm going to get as many people to register to vote, and like together we can change some things. And I'm just, going to put the word out there. And he did. And so he got a petition signed. He needed so many signatures, got it done. Put himself on the ballot. This is the impossible. And he's doing the impossible. He's a school teacher, and he actually did well. He just went around and shook hands, and he knocked on doors, and he got kids that had either in his classes or had recently graduated who were fans of him to volunteer. And all of a sudden, it picked up some steam for the media because it was a really good story, and he was just a good guy all around. At the end of the day, he just wanted to do the right thing, and it really took off when he won, and he was the Democratic nominee, and he became the first Latino to be so. And so then it gained national attention. Everyone's like, who the heck is this Victor Morales guy in Texas running against the incumbent Phil Gramm, who had a lot of money, a lot of power, a well-known name, and Dad was taking him on. And then so we watched it. We watched it as little kids. It was a really cool thing to watch. All of a sudden, these media members show up in my kitchen. They were writing feature stories right there at my kitchen table, or they were putting their news cameras up in my front yard. And it was all stuff that I told them, Crandall, Texas is small. For anyone that's listening that even knows where Crandall, Texas, I'm impressed. It's no stoplights. At the time, we had less than 2,000 people there in the city. So, it's like we didn't see much, or we didn't know much. And we were learning so much about the political world, but it got so ugly so fast. It was the commercials that were coming out where the Republican Party was putting out lies about Dad. Spoiler alert, people, a lot of these things that you see on TV aren't true when it comes to campaigns and election years, because I lived it. And I remember my mom crying, when she's watching these lies come out in the newspapers, and it was awful, So there was the really cool stuff, and then there was the stuff that people will never understand unless you're in a family like that, where social media wasn't even around yet. I can't even imagine how much worse it is for kids. But so it left an impression on me that it's too bad, maybe it would have for me to get into if I was a little bit older, understood it a little bit better, but I wanted no part of it. Dad didn't stay in it. He went back to teaching and ended up retiring, and has one hell of a story because all of it. But he got a lot of people to register to vote at the end of the day. He was on my college exam, as one of the questions was about who was the first Latino to run for U.S. Senate there in Texas, and that was Dad, which is really cool. so did some really, really cool things. But yeah, it was a lot. It was a lot for a young kid to take in and to understand. And I understand a lot more now, but it really just kind of changed my perception. And I learned, it's like I have this thing, and I like sports, Jared. Like there's the reason why when I wanted to go into TV, it was like, do you want to go this route or this route? I'm like, nope, take me to the football field, please. I want no part of that because it can get really ugly.
You mentioned, your dad being the first minority nominee to get that far. Was that ever a conversation you guys had as a family, or was it something that you just on your own recognized the significance of that, or at what point, if you didn't then, did you recognize the significance of that?
Probably when he was on my college exam. And I hate that too, but while I was in it, we were very proud of Dad and what he was doing. And I listened to all the speeches that he gave. So I was old enough to pick up on what he was saying. And that was a big message that he was getting out there, because he was reaching out to minorities and there's not enough of us voting was his message. And so he was trying to go to those communities where there are a lot of minorities that had yet to register. I mean, that was a big part of the campaign. So I understood that by listening to his speeches, and his whole slogan was "E por qué no," and why not a school teacher? And why not me? It was like that was his whole slogan, and he had shirts made. So, I mean, we were very proud of that, and I was very proud that my last name is Morales. And, if people knew what I look like, I'm a redhead with blue eyes because my mom is a redhead with green eyes and fair skin. And so we didn't look like Morales family, but gosh, we were, it was like we were so proud of that Hispanic name and what he was doing with it. And so, yeah, no, I mean, I grew up with that, but it wasn't until it was like written out, and then it was like, oh my gosh, like that's really kind of cool. Like he really did do something. And now, all these years later, he's one of my favorite, he is my favorite person on this planet. And my mom, I just look up to so much, and what he did and what he showed us through all that. It was hard, and somehow he was standing through all of it and just kept taking the hits and he never wrote a speech. This guy is the best speech giver on the planet. So yeah, I mean, I have the utmost respect for my daddy, and he's the best. And gosh, yeah, now, oh my gosh, my whole understanding is completely different. My appreciation for what he did is definitely there.
Okay, so you go to the University of Texas, and you're a part of Texas Pom in an era where UT football was really good. And I don't bring up the Rose Bowl just yet because we'll get to that. But just in general, what was that experience like for you, and what pushed you to join that group and have that be such a big part of your college experience?
Yeah, so I'd always, you grow up in Texas and you have to pick A&M or Texas, right? I mean, you don't really pick a side when you're a kid and you have no idea what you're doing or why, or, maybe it's just your family swaying you one way or the other. But I was a Texas fan from the beginning. I always thought that would be a really cool place to go to school. And then once I got a little bit older, I knew I wanted to be in TV. I wanted to be a TV reporter. That's what I would tell people. And so I realized that the journalism school was really good there as well. So I told you, I played all sports. I was in cheerleading, but my aunt is a dance teacher, and I spent my whole, after school life at a dance studio. I taught dance and took from the time I was 2 years old. So that's also a big part of our family and our lives. And so, I actually went to Kilgore College first, which is in East Texas. I was a rangerette because that was another dream of mine that I wanted to check off, and that ended up being the two of the coolest years of my entire life. It was the first ever drill team. A lot of history on that campus and with that drill team, just some really cool experiences as I got to be in the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade and the inauguration parade in 2004 for Bush there in D.C. in March, and super, super cool. And so after that, my goal was to get to UT. It was to transfer over to be in communications, study broadcast journalism. I had a plan. And why not be on Texas Pom? I had the dance experience. Why wouldn't you want to be around that program? Vince Young was already up and coming. He's already doing his thing on the campus. So when I transferred over, it was 2005. That was my first year. And it was one great year to be on the sidelines. Every regular season game, there's a fight song that you learn. It's a dance that you learn to the fight song, and we did it a bajillion times. It felt like every game because Vince was scoring 70 points on Texas Tech, and it was a lot of fun. So it was just it made sense for me to do it. It was exactly what I wanted to do, and I can't believe I got to do it in an era where it's one we still talk about and we still look at because it's been a while since the Longhorns have been that good.
So I think you know this, maybe you don't. I went to USC, but I grew up in Dallas, and I was still, over a year away from even applying to USC. So I remember watching that game, rooting for Texas, really just being fascinated with the amount of talent that was on the field. But now that I go to USC, I get ribbed about it a lot, and it does hurt because I fully embrace USC and I love USC, but I don't necessarily have the same pain that someone who went there or had already gone there probably experiences. Right. But so that's probably why I'm so willing and excited to ask this and hear your response. But what was that experience like? And are there any? I mean, I know that when it's the national championship game, it's not like you just show up for the game and that's it. I know that there's a whole song and dance around it, and it's such a big deal, especially that one. So what was that experience like? I don't know if there are any like awesome stories from it, but what do you remember when you think back to that?
So what's crazy is that since it was my first year being on Texas Pom and being on the Texas campus, I didn't really know what life was like without the team being the number 1 or number 2 college football team all season. So it was like I didn't have anything to compare it to. So I'm pretty spoiled in that I get on this campus and all the talk is about Texas, and it's like every week college game days there, and it was just like the coolest season leading up to it. It was like a dream, and and then I'm also trying to make sure that I'm studying and doing all the things that I'm a first timer on these huge classes and a lot going on. I would give anything to go back and just kind of relive that year. And now, it's like there were so many more things I think I would have taken in, just because it was so much right there at the beginning for me. But the other thing is I do not feel bad for anyone at USC as they all showed up to that game in their three-peat shirts. I will never forget that. It's like I don't feel bad for that school. And it's like, sorry. But no, that you're right. There's a whole song and dance when it comes to national championship. And again, stuff I didn't know, but it was like the parades that we had. I mean, how many appearances did we make at different things? And they would split us up and pep rallies and big donors would have parties, and they would want a couple of Pom girls there, and then Bevo would have to show up. And I mean, we just did so much of that leading up to it. And then of course the Rose Bowl parade. I mean, it's so cool. What an experience. And then the game. I mean, come on with the game. I was on the opposite end zone as the touchdown. But I'm telling you, it felt like once it scored, it felt like, I jumped in the air, and then it felt like my feet didn't touch the ground for a good 45 minutes after that. It was that, I mean, it was just like this level of, I can't even explain it, especially if you're a sports fan and you grow up in sports and you're already competitive, and then your team is at the highest level and they win in that fashion and beat that team. I mean, it was incredible, and it's still incredible. I mean, that game, people ask me to this day, what's the best game you've ever seen in person? And now I've got a Game 5 of the 2017 World Series that I have to compare it to, because that game too. I mean, I've been blessed. Like the fact that I was at both of those games is like not fair, right? It's not fair to sports fans. But fun. And then there was so much after. It just continues. And, there's parades after that. And we had things on the field. I remember Vince ran around the stadium afterwards sometime in January where it was freezing in Austin, but we didn't care as we were wearing our chaps and our little fringe vests. I mean, we just didn't care. It was so cool. Yeah, I mean, I love sports anyway. I love sports media already. I couldn't wait to get into it. But, I mean, to have those experiences as a 21-year-old, were huge for me, just because I was paying attention to everything. I watched every reporter that walked on that field. I watched every woman that walked out, and I was like, wow, that's what I want to do. It was just like that helped mold me and put me in this position I am today. Just a really, really cool, unique experience for me to kind of be there at the right place at the right time.
So you mentioned seeing the women who were doing the roles that you wanted and you do now. Who were, whether it was then or just since in your professional career, who were or have been some of your biggest influences?
It's a great question. So, honestly, with all that I mentioned, just like being so active and playing a lot of sports, and, people are like, did you grow up watching baseball? Did you grow up watching football? And it's like, I mean, yeah, but I didn't sit in front of the TV every night at 7:00. We were so busy. We were doing our own thing. So I didn't, it's like when I got to college and started seeing people in person and then going home and flipping it on and seeing, the broadcasters after that, that's when I was starting to put it all together. Like who was who, what jobs were what was their role in the broadcast. So I was older, it was like, Erin Andrews had just kind of stepped on the scene as far as being a sideline reporter, which we didn't know much about. But before that, there was a weekend sports anchor at the CBS affiliate there in Austin where I interned. And her job impressed me because, I realized that she could host, she could stand on she'd be at the desk with the main anchors. And I mean, like all of this seems very normal right now as people are listening, but I'm like in 2004 and 2005, like that was a big deal. There wasn't a lot of them. And then for me to see her up close, work and write and realize that no one was doing anything for her. It was just her. She had someone, that would help her shoot highlights. But she would sit at that desk and put together stories and know her stuff. And I'd listen to her talk and I was just amazed by her and amazed by the fact that was an actual job. And that's when everything kind of switched for me. And it was like, okay, I want to do what you do. How do I get there? What do I do? And then I started kind of working my way to that, putting my resume tapes together, learning from her how to write, how to edit. So, I mean, it's like not the big woman, not the big name answer that you were probably looking for, but it was just like, she really helped me realize that this was a possibility in my life. And then, from there, that's when I started watching the Michelle Tafoyas and the Susie Colberts. And I mean, I just became obsessed with them and I watched everything that they would do. And I would learn, it's like they were so versatile. They could do it all. They could report, they could host, they could, it was just like anything you wanted them to do, they were good at it. And so that's, those became my role models as I started watching, but, there wasn't a lot of sideline reporters at the time that became something, like the Astros sideline reporter job that I had now wasn't a thing that traveled with the team until 2013 when I got the job. So, it's like looking back, you were just looking at women in sports. You weren't looking like, I want to be a field reporter for a baseball team. Like that's just not how we saw it. I just saw someone that was a female in the industry, and that's what I wanted to do, and so I went and got it.
One thing I want to ask you about, and you shared with social media and got an amazing response, which I thought was super cool from some of the players and members of the Astros. But you are expecting to have a kid, and congratulations!
Thank you.
So yeah. We're in a period where, with what's going on around the world, there are a lot of people who are admitting, hey, I'm white. I don't know what it's like to be black. I don't know what it's like to be Hispanic. And so I want to ask you, I'm a guy. I don't know what it's like to be a woman, especially a woman who does what you do with everything that goes into it and also wants to start a family. What I guess what's that like? And what challenges have maybe come up, if it's okay that I ask, and how have you dealt with those?
No, it's a great question. I'm glad you asked, and I hope to, once we get out of this, I hope to talk about it more. My experience, what I went through as far as just my thought process on how to get here. So, I just got finished talking about like how I was willing to do anything to get into the industry and be, and just get in. Like I didn't know really what I wanted to do once I got in there, but this is what I wanted to do. And so that takes a lot of hard work, a lot of sacrifice. And then once you're in, you kind of just follow where it leads you, right? And so you say yes to jobs. I went to Sherman, Texas. I went to Tyler, Texas. I went back to Austin, Texas. So I was super, super lucky when it comes to being able to just kind of stay in Texas and cover teams that I knew already. But I mean, imagine if that was Timbuktu or, like I would have said yes if it was the right time, if that opportunity put itself in front of my face. So as far as starting a family, finding somebody, falling in love was like difficult because I worked so much and I worked hard, and I was like, I didn't want it to slow me down because I didn't want to be stuck in Sherman, Texas. I love Sherman, Texas, but that's not where I wanted to end my career. Making $15,000 a year, that wasn't the life for me. And so, then it's like you get to Tyler, what's next? Get to Austin, what's next? So it was just, I kept just trying to climb. That was my soul. That was my goal. And I was so head down and working hard. So then you're like, okay, I do want a family, but how the heck do you fit that in? I met Matt while I was in Austin. He was playing for the Tucson Padres, which is a AAA affiliate for the Padres, but his dad was the pitching coach for the Round Rock Express, who I got really close to. And his dad introduced us, and I did a story on him, and that's how we met and became friends, and then we ended up dating and eventually married. But my husband is still in professional ball playing in Mexico League, and I'm over here living my dream job, and it was like, how the heck are we going to have a family? How is that going to work? And so we were both pursuing our dreams. We were doing what we wanted to do. Neither of us were ready to stop, which made us kind of a perfect couple. It made us very compatible because we're early 30s. We're trying to figure it out. So here I am, 35, and it's like I need to start a family, and that scared me. It gave me anxiety to think about, like, I'm traveling with a baseball team. What's it gonna look like if I all of a sudden have a child? It's like all these questions start to come up, things that men don't have to think about. Like, I'm like, how am I going to take my pregnant self to the ballpark every day? What happens later? I mean, questions that I'm like, keep me up at night. And that's what it's like. That is what it's like. It's like these things are just constantly going through your head. What happens when I do have the kid? How is my job going to change? Like what will people think of me? What will my brand look like? I could just go on and on and on, and you can kill yourself thinking that way and being so obsessed with what it's going to look like. And, finally got to a good point, Matt and I both, where it was like, let's just do it and listen to everyone's advice that says you're going to figure it out, right? And I've watched Emily Jones do it. I've watched her have 2 kids and be an absolute boss woman, which she hates that term, but she is. She's great at her job. She's an awesome mom. And I can do it too. And so it was now my role models kind of changed, right? And I was looking at people who have had kids in the industry and been successful. And so those are my people now. Those are the people that I look up to now. I'm like, what's next for me? I still want to do this. I just want to do this and have a family. And so it's my time finally. I'm super excited. Thank you for even bringing it up. But there are a lot of questions that need answers, and I'm not sure what it's going to look like a year from now or 5 years from now, if I have 2 or 3, or where this all goes, which is exciting at times, but also very scary for a girl like me who worked so hard to get here. You don't want to lose it, and I love my job so much. So, but yeah, I mean, that was a really cool thing that the players were involved, and people are so, so happy. People love babies, I've learned. and so I'm just going to kind of enjoy this phase, right? And I know there's so much going on in the world, but it is a really exciting time for me and my family. So we're trying to enjoy this, and then we'll just kind of figure it out. Babies due at the end of what we think would have been baseball season. So next year, just stay tuned, right? Stay tuned as we all figure this out together.
Well, first of all, thank you for sharing that. And again, congratulations. And
Thank you.
There's so many people who are really excited. And, I'm sure your husband's excited. You mentioned your husband, Matt, and he still plays. Family's obviously super important. You just touched on that. What are the challenges that you've dealt with the separation? Even if Matt lived in Houston 365
right.
days out of the year, you would still deal with it because you're traveling a lot, not just, going to the ballpark seems like every night for 7 months, but you're on the road. But, he's not in Houston all the time. You mentioned he plays in the Mexican League and you guys are apart. What are some of the things that have helped you guys get through, I imagine some tough times of separation?
Yeah, well, he used to play in Japan. So that was tough. It's like if we can live through that for a couple seasons, Mexico's easy. That's a one quick flight. The time zone is usually very similar. But we've always known that because that's how our relationship started. And like I said, we were both mentally gearing up for how are we going to reach our ultimate goals in our careers. And so it was kind of good timing for us. We were each other's cheerleader. Whatever it took, I got the job with the Astros after he had taken off for Japan that first year. And that was very difficult in the meeting stage. I was living my best life with a major league team, which was his dream. Lots of challenges there, and worked through them and survived those. And it made us super strong. And so we don't talk a lot of baseball. We are right now just because there's nothing else going on in the world. It's like we don't have games to watch or anything, so we're like talking about the news of the world. But usually it's our job, and we'll talk about our day, but it's not something we spend a ton of time on. But there's a lot of baseball in our lives. So yeah, we've just kind of figured it out. I go see him once a month usually if all is well in the world. I've worked that out with my team and my contracts where I can get that time with him. He's got an all-star break. I've got an all-star break. His season doesn't go as long as ours, so I get to see him a little bit more. But I mean, you're right. Like it wouldn't matter where he was going to be anyway, because my job is just so grueling as far as the health goes, and I'm on the road all the time. So he could have been sitting at home and I still wouldn't see him. So it worked out perfectly. We were at least on the same hours at the same time of year. And so we have awesome off seasons. We do lots of traveling. We see our families, and we, just every day in the off season is so special and so precious, and it works. And then we grind, and then we meet back up. And yeah, it's worked so far. I'm telling you, it's going to be different next year. Neither one of us know. And especially with him, I mean, there's so much unknown every year. And the Mexican League, they don't have these long-term contracts. And so we've been living this life for a while. But we're ready for it, and we've been through some stuff already. So, bring it on. If we can survive 2022, like seriously, bring it on, world. Like we can handle anything. But yeah, definitely challenges. FaceTime's been a huge help, just because I will literally get ready for work while I'm talking to him. It's like I can get stuff done, and we can still feel like we're in the same room at the same time. That's been a game changer. But yeah, I mean, I know it's the relationship part of it is so important, and this job, this games sometimes feel lonely if you're traveling with the team a lot. So he's been huge in all that. We've just found our little system, and it works well.
All right, Julia, a couple more questions. The first one of the couple remaining, I want to ask you about what's happened with the Astros, not from the standpoint of the nitty gritty of what was reported in the penalties, but you're around this team, and you're around it way more than I am. And I know there's a rivalry that exists, and it's a fun rivalry. But I've gotten a chance in a small capacity to get to know some of the people part of the organization, whether it's people like yourself or Steve Sparks, but also the players who are part of this. And I know that there are some really good people in that clubhouse, and no one knows that better than you do. And some of those good people were thrust into the middle of this, and good people can make mistakes and whatever. That's not really what this is about. But how do you go about reconciling the fact that there are people who don't want to hear it? They don't want to hear about that. But There are some really good people, and no one's perfect. I'm not perfect. You're not perfect. These guys aren't perfect. I don't know. I'm sure that it's a thought that you've had, because I thought, well, what if this happened to the Rangers? And the great people I know part of that organization, and it just, I don't know. I guess what how have you dealt with that? How have you reconciled that?
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, it's heartbreaking. It was heartbreaking to find out. It was heartbreaking to know, that so many people were involved. And okay, I know it's a game, and people can say that, and I know it's just a job for us, but we're around this team so much, or these teams and these players, and you get to know their families, and it becomes your livelihood. You're spending that much time, and so you're I mean, deep down, I'm a fan. I work for the network. We're TV partners with the team. I mean, I can't help but root for some of these people that I trust and respect, and I can't. And so it's really disappointing to find it all out. And then to watch them get crucified by it's like the players coming out, it's just one after the other. It felt like people were just piling on. Really, really hard to watch because these are your friends in a way. It's like, how would you feel if that was someone that you cared for? And then it's like, their wives are struggling with it. They've got little kids they've got to have these tough conversations with. It goes on and on and on. And then employees, you mentioned Sparky. There's a lot of people around this organization that have nothing to do with it at all that are still having to deal with it because they wear the Astros logo. So a tough off season. Really a tough World Series starting from game one. I can go back and talk about the month. So 2020 has been rough, but us over here in Houston could probably take it with all that's gone on. So yeah, I was not looking forward to hitting the road with this team for the first time since I got this job because I didn't want to sit through it because if I'm hearing it, they're hearing it, and we were gonna hear it, and from fans that were all across the country, and I was really worried about that because it gets old. One game of it, I remember Jake Marisnick. I don't know if you remember the collision with Luke last year
because he came right to Arlington right after.
Oh yeah, and so when we went to Anaheim, they were ruthless, and that's Anaheim. That fan base is what it is, but it's not. It's not even like a hardcore fill the seats every night fan base, and they gave it to the Astros and gave it to Jake Marisnick, and that was hard. That was heavy that night. It was hard to sit on the bus. It was like it didn't feel good. Jake Marisnick's a good guy and didn't mean to, but he was going to wear it for the team. And it was just awful. And I thought, oh my gosh, they're going to have to do that every single night on the road in 2020. So we thought it all. We were thinking about it. We were wondering how we were going to get through it. I wondered if it was going to bring the team together, but gosh, that was going to be really hard. So, now with all of this, who knows when fans will actually get their chance at the Astros. But no, with all this on in the world, honestly, Jared, it's totally kind of changed the way I've felt about it. That stuff was really hard to just kind of process, and the firings of an AJ Hinch, who's been so great to us, Jeff Luhnow, who's been around, that's done so much. That was really, really hard to process. But then it's like going through all of this, you find a little bit of perspective in just like life and things that are super important. And, it's like you think back to the beginning of March, and it was all about what the guys were saying in the clubhouse and what, they weren't saying the right thing and they weren't saying enough. And you look back at that and you're like, gosh, that, it's like how little does that feel compared to what is going on in the world right now? It's just people, and they make mistakes, and they made a big one, and they're paying for it and will continue to pay for it. And a lot of them aren't even around for that at all. It's like the people that are still on this team. There's a lot of guys on that team that weren't even around in 2017. So yeah, it's going to be interesting no matter what, when it all gets back to baseball and they get on the field. But I feel like this has given us a chance to continue to move away from it and to understand that it is in the past. It's 2020, and we're talking about something that happened in 2017. So we'll see. But yeah, not over it, no. but we got to find a way.
And you bring up Jake Marisnick, and I interrupted you, and I apologize. But you guys, I think, went directly from Anaheim to Arlington, and he had to answer questions that next day. And I remember just being there because I had to try and figure out who I was going to do for a pregame interview, and I'm sure I was trying to pluck someone on your side, and I just remember looking at Jake as he was answering these questions, and you realize this is a guy who had no intention to do anything bad other than play hard and win a game. And
yeah,
there's some guys around the league who maybe aren't as good people, whatever. But I remember standing there, and I thank gosh he didn't look at me, because I was probably just staring, and I just felt so bad. And you realize that what these guys do to win a game is not always representative of who they are as people.
Right.
And that was a mistake. It wasn't like he was even, had any, malintent, but it's just, I don't know that I'm glad you brought that up, because that was something that stuck with me the rest of the year was remembering,
Mm-hmm.
I remember what he was wearing, and I was probably
Right.
admiring his hair because he's got like such great hair. But I just remember that moment. All right. Last
Yeah.
thing, Julia,
Okay.
it's really cool when your name comes up, especially in the Houston area, the love and respect and appreciation the Houston sports fans have for you. And I think it's tough. You've bounced around and been in different markets. I know before I came back home to Dallas, I was in Michigan and Montana. And I know it's not easy to become a part of the fabric of that community, and especially when it's a big city like Houston. What did you do? What are the things that were important to you, and just becoming a part of that the way you have and have done very successfully?
Thank you. First of all, it's very sweet. I've really fallen in love with this city and fallen in love with the fan base. And that's not just the Astros, it's the Rockets, it's the Texans. I mean, I've just really put myself in this community. And now that I've been doing this for 8 years, I've found a way to get into the community in different ways and give back. And I've just jumped into an animal rescue that I love so much. And that's opened doors for me in the city. And I've met more people. And it's home. It's where I was born, actually, but I didn't spend a lot of time here. I spent some time in all these other Texas cities, but to land in Houston and to I expected it to all of a sudden become my home, where I'm going to hopefully raise kids. And I mean, it's crazy what can happen. But thinking back, my first year was 2013. It was a very tough time for the Astros organization, but it was also a very good time to be starting up with the Astros organization. There were a lot of new faces. There was obviously new ownership. A lot of them weren't going to stick around for very long, but they were good guys that were given opportunities, and they were good to be in the league. Two days in there. Dallas Keuchel was on the team, Marwin Gonzalez, and I got to see those guys when they were just major leaguers on this really bad team trying to figure out like how to have consistent at bats. And so it was a good time. Our network was just getting started. So I had a new group. I think back, and what did I do? Well, at the time we were trying to give viewers something to watch because the team was struggling so bad. So we tried to make it fun, and I tried to use that first year in the American League and teach people about ballparks that the Astros didn't spend a lot of time in ever in their entire history. And I did fun stories around the cities, and I don't know, it was just, I guess, every night people would tune in, and I would be like that smiling girl having a heck of a time because she was just living her best life in Seattle, or, it was like trying the food in Pittsburgh, or so, but it was real, it was genuine, and I was so excited to be in my dream job covering Major League Baseball and getting the opportunity to go to these cities I'd never been to before. So, I was a first timer. So I think back, and that was people's first impressions of me. I never changed. As the team got better, I became more baseball oriented, obviously. We didn't even need to talk about food anymore once it got to 2015 because the team was good. We had stuff to talk about. They were actually competing with the Texas Rangers at that time. But I didn't change who I was. I continued to be myself. We have a really good chemistry in the broadcast booth. It was Bill Brown for so long. It was Alan Ashby. It was Jeff Blum. Now it's Todd Callis, who was like, gosh, the easiest guy to fill in and be the next voice. He's the greatest guy. So I've had, really great broadcasters to click with, and we're who we are, behind the scenes. Like what you see on TV is exactly who we are. And we have these broadcaster Zooms now, and it's just so obvious. It's like we're a family. We love the Astros. We love being together. We love calling the games, and I think that is very apparent when you turn on our broadcast. So we take a lot of pride in that. And like what you're seeing right now, Jared, I'm the same person, and I try to tell people that are upcoming reporters, and it's like depending on your job. If you get a job like mine in baseball of all places, where it is a little more fun, you get a little more slack, and you have some time to be yourself, then do it. Like don't fake it. Don't try to be someone else. That's going to be a long, exhausting career, right? Just love what you do and enjoy going to the ballpark or the arena or wherever it is you're headed, and you'll and people will see that, and they'll enjoy listening to you, and they'll trust you, and the players see it, and that's helped my relationship with them. And so I truly believe that. So I try to pass that on. There are times that we do have to get serious. I'm not going to sit here and say I'm silly all the time, but no, I just want people to know that I am the same person on TV as I am off of it, and I think that's really important. So hopefully, I mean, maybe that's why I think, growing up with the team when it was struggling to winning a World Series obviously helped, and a lot of people that jumped on or finally started watching consistently saw us and have tuned in to see us every night. And so we're, now that there's more change, it's like we are the most consistent faces that you've seen in the last decade of Astros baseball, which is crazy, right? I mean, there's Altuve and then there's us. So everybody else is kind of new or newer. And I find some responsibility in that as well, and carrying the name well. I know every time I walk outside my door, people think of me as the Astros sideline reporter, and I don't mind it. I'm very, very proud. So yeah, it means a lot for you to say that, and it means a lot to see the nice things that people say, because I feel the same way about them too.
Well, there you go, episode 42 of the Just a Sec conversation with Julia Morales. And, I really, it's cool hearing her answer that last question. And it's really been neat for me as I've gotten to know Julia to see how she really is similar to Emily Jones and the way she's a fixture in that community. And that's not how it always works. The Emilys and the Julias and the Sophia Minnaert, who we got a chance to chat with earlier in this series. You can catch her conversation on the channel as well. Those three women and a few others, a select few others, really go beyond just the role of broadcaster and have an impact within the fan base and the community. And it's really cool to watch and to witness. And we get the chance as fans of the Rangers to see that with Emily, and Astros fans get that with Julia. We got 2 more episodes coming out next week. Thanks so much for tuning in to episode 42 of the Just a Sec conversation. Be safe, stay healthy. We'll talk to you soon.